Yeah, now let us shift our focus from the standpoint of the actual learning and development folks. So how would this be leveraged by them in their organization when there are many other things happening, workshops and training programs and coaching and other things going on parallel?
We look at it from a role perspective. That is, are you a salesperson? Are you a first-time manager? Are you, customer support? And, we think that looking at the world through those particular roles that people take on, and one person could have all of those roles, right? You could be a first-time manager who does some sales and also interacts with customers. But from a role perspective, what skills do people need to have to succeed in those roles? And so from a the L&D practitioner who's designing a learning program, you look at what is the role you're trying to train for? What does a first-time manager need to know? What do they need to do? And so often that's the piece that gets missed because it's been hard and expensive to do in the past. And so we fit into that location in the learning cycle. And through our app and through an LMS, you can access this as part of that learning journey.
Awesome. John Muldoon, would you like to chime in?
Sure. In that case, I think being able to create the experiences or the situations that someone's going to face in the workplace is where some of the creative talent is needed in the L&D world, right? Because sometimes we overlook the situations that people are really going to face in the workplace. And, we've been really strongly focused on that. And that's obviously where the role play comes in and building comfort. And, and across an organization, and, we do a lot in the sales coaching area, as you imagine, because they do a lot of role play. But some people really do want to practice, but practice on their own. You have individuals that might be shy at first, worried about the reaction of their manager. If the first couple of goes, it looks like you're stumbling. And we wanted to make it easier for those people that might get run over in the broader meetings by the alpha salespeople. And so we found in our experience in talking with some of the learners that it really helped them a lot in their aspiring professional journey.
True. And I'll add one thing to that, John. One of the things we've seen with salespeople is that because they can practice anytime, anywhere, they don't practice during business hours. Weekends and evenings, when they aren't selling, when they aren't visiting customers, when they aren't on the road, that's when they have time and the desire to actually practice. And keeping these practice sessions short, we're talking a minute or so per lesson. Those micro lessons are easy to, you've got 10 minutes at home, you can practice your sales pitch, you can practice overcoming objections on a Sunday evening, and it works into their schedule rather than into the L&D, sit down in front of your desk for an hour and take the compliance training type schedule.
Yeah, those bite-sized chunks, right, of learning and applying knowledge. I mean, that's really it works.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing your insights. Now let's shift it from a financial point of view. So let's take the perspective of the C-suite. What is the ROI of utilizing an AI-powered tool versus the traditional training models for skill development of workforce?
That's a good question. And I think, there's probably a few answers to it. But the ROI to the C-suite gives confidence that the program is focused and has a high probability of producing outcomes. In particular, let's stick with the sales coaching model, right? Has someone as a new hired salesperson, been able to be conversationally fluent quicker using this software, and ultimately has their sales performance also shown that it is working. So the two have to tie together. I think there's more of a push in the industry now of really trying to measure outcomes relative to L&D programs. And I think with AI, you're going to see streamlining of the learning experience. And I think it's going to get applied differently. But we happen to be one with a really good solution that helps along that path.
Awesome.
Yeah. And for the C-suite, it really comes down to what are you getting for your dollar? With the budget that you would use for, in-person coaching, you can, through AI guided role play, reach a much larger audience of people, 50, 100 times as many people for the same price. And you can actually measure whether they have demonstrated the skill or not, objectively. And, certainly measuring ROI is one of those magic bullet things. Did a lot of research on that in the performance management lab. It's very difficult to separate out all the factors that go into a particular KPI. Training, the way that a process is organized, external factors from interest rates to demand curves. These things are all in motion. So, saying that this, other than very, very, specific cost-saving measures in operations or, efforts in sales organizations, it can be pretty much every other part of the company struggles to prove that they have had a significant impact on the bottom line. However, you can measure whether your programmers are writing bug-free code. You can measure whether the product is meeting specification as it comes off of the finish line. And you can measure whether people have the skills in conversation or not, if you have a way of engaging them and measuring those conversational skills. And we bring that to the table.
Yeah.
And that's a key piece of what we do and why it's important to the C-suite.
Yeah. Another area where that can, as an example to what John just explained, is the customer reps. Have they had better conversations with your customers? Has the amount of time spent on a helpline or a support line gotten shorter? Have the surveys that you get inundated with after a customer service call, are they showing a much higher level of satisfaction? So these are good quantitative ways to determine the effectiveness of these programs.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yes, I agree. There are tangible and intangible areas to measure. Like you rightly said, with sales reps and all, what is the customer experience? And sometimes
Right.
there are quantifiable factors and sometimes there are qualitative factors. So I'm glad that we are discussing this aspect also, because it becomes important from the buyer's perspective or the people who are involved in the learning and development. So now, from your standpoint, for an AI powered tool like yours to be effective in role play practice, what factors are of importance to consider?
Number one, by far, is, do you know what a good conversation looks like? That's something that drives our software. It starts with here's a good conversation. And so, we've had customers use recordings on phone support lines or sales support, sales calls as a foundation. Others do role play, and we can use those role play scripts. Sometimes we generate those scripts fresh from the material that folks have been using, but have been more informal in terms of how they teach those types of interpersonal and conversational skills. But if you can define what a good conversation looks like, then you can tell the AI, this is what a good conversation looks like. These are the component, these are the sort of the semantic qualities that make it a good conversation, and it can do the rest. And if you've done that well, then that's really the foundation.
Thanks for sharing that. So how close to reality, or as we say, real world experience, can an AI-enabled role play be scripted for the user to really feel this is real world?
So it varies. I'm not going to pretend that our users are fooled into thinking they're talking to to a real human being. They're interrupted by the AI coach, as it were. It's not a character. The AI coach is not a character. It's it's feedback that's provided in a more kind of we don't put a character behind the feedback, but it's something that because they know that this is a simulation, they recognize that they're in a safe place. So that's in some ways makes it different, obviously, than a real world situation. One of the signifiers that we've seen that people are benefiting from it and are really getting into it is a feeling of awkwardness. Not awkwardness because of the simulation per se, but because they've never been asked to do this kind of practice before. We found that, and you'll see this if you do role play with people in a classroom. And if any of you out there have ever done role play in training before, it's awkward. It's not fun. It feels weird, right? And when we see that same kind of reaction with our software, we know that we're getting them into that role play situation. So the key and what makes this work is that you have to take the ideas out of the classroom and put them into words that are naturally coming out of your mouth. You need to say the things, the right things, at the right time, in the right way, given the situation. And I can speak from personal experience. The difference between answering the right questions in a multiple choice test on sexual harassment and hostile workplace environment training, and having a conversation with someone who's come to you as their manager because they're facing a situation in the workplace is a world of difference. And all that knowledge doesn't necessarily come through as you talk without practice. There are many oral motor skills, idea planning skills, sentence construction skills that all have to be brought together in the context of, the legal framework and the person's individual needs and all those other components, so that it sounds not only authentic and heartfelt, the right thing to say in the situation. And that takes practice. It is unreasonable to expect that anyone can just do that because they've had some classroom training. For the L&D professionals out there, something to think about is when you go to script this really good conversation, just writing down the script, you will feel awkward and you will find it difficult. Imagine how difficult it must be for your learners who do not know the material as well as you do and are in the pressure of the situation to, in a sense, create that script live and put it into words as it's happening. That's a huge challenge for many people. And our goal is to help them, be practiced enough so that when they're actually in the situation, they're able to think about the higher order issues so that while the basics are already fluent.
In your experience till now, what are some of the skills that have been scripted using AI-powered tool?
There's a lot of skills that this applies to, right? When we started this, we were focused on general management skills, and John alluded to a few, and giving performance reviews. But there's also, how to coach individuals, how to delegate, how to give and receive feedback, and and some of the more tougher conversations, delivering bad news, right? Or having those critical conversations that you need to have in an organization. We also, we've said it before, but sales, customer service, DE&I training is really, we're finding is a good place to be able to provide this practice room for.
Thanks. Anything to add, John Hack?
I mean, really, it's any time someone is in need of having a difficult conversation in the workplace. And sometimes those are more public facing. They could be public relations, corporate communications. We had one customer who was looking at helping technical people have conversations with the business people that they serve, so that they can translate what they're doing technically into language that the business people understand, rather than talking the bits and the bytes. So, the range is really broad. But, John really hit on, where we're finding the most interest in the market is around managerial skills, sales and customer service, and, DE&I.
What is the typical pushback or objection that you face when you propose this, and what, according to you, would be the best response to these kind of objections that you face about using an AI tool?
The biggest one is that most L&D professionals today are already overwhelmed with the amount of work they face as they try to keep up with the changes in the workplace and keep the training machine, as it were, running, because there are so many demands on the workforce today. So it's really, in many ways, a bandwidth issue for a group of folks who already have probably an overly complicated infrastructure and not enough hours in the day. So we're, continue to work to make this easier and more straightforward to adopt. But that's often the case, not just for us, but for many new technologies.
Yeah.
There are a couple of other things that we sometimes hear. One is a concern that it's not as good as a human, and we don't intend to replace humans. That's not the goal of this software. And BJ, you're a coach. You're using our software. You understand what I mean here, right? We're here to basically amplify what you're doing as a coach, so that people can practice these foundational skills with the AI. And when they come to you, you can give them the more sophisticated, the more nuanced feedback that takes their skills to an even higher level.
And that's not a threat.
Right, yeah. Exactly. And that threat, that fear of being replaced ultimately is, I think, misplaced. But behind it, I think, is a genuine, fear is probably too strong a word, discomfort with the changes that are taking place in the workplace because of AI. And it's not just coaches, it's not just L&D professionals, it's everybody. So there's a
fear of the unknown.
Yeah, but I think there's a, there's a flip side to that, which is the opportunity for the L&D people to be embracing AI technology in a way that allows them to legitimately become the folks who show other groups within their company how AI can be adopted as part of their operations.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would add to that, and John hit the nail on the head earlier, that, you know, the workloads have been significant, and you know, implementing change takes a lot of additional effort. But at some point, you have to get over that hurdle, because if you want to reduce quantitative workloads, you're going to have to take that step. The end result is going to be, we believe, you know, better, or, you know, qualitative outcomes, right? So you want to reduce quantitative workloads and increase qualitative outcomes, and that's, you know, that takes taking the step, trying it, learning it. If you don't try it, you can't learn it. And you know, we've been fortunate enough in part of our journey to work with some of the institutions that of instructional design, and we were able to give some of these young students an opportunity to see how AI plays in the workplace, in particular in the L&D world. And so they come out with the knowledge that there are other tools, and there's other ways to look at this learning journey. And there's going to be a, you know, to me and John, I know, and probably to you too, BJ, it's exciting times for those that want to embrace it.
Yeah, exactly. And relating to the point about uncomfortableness, as learning and development professionals, everybody can attest to this, that learning and growth happens in the uncomfortable zone, not in the comfort zone. As you rightly said, John, that the learning and development folks can use this AI to for the entire company to, like, you know, adapt to this. That how AI-based solutions can be augmenting the other aspects of business, and how an AI-enabled tool can be blended in addition to all the other programs that are prevalent inside the company.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sure.
So
We have seen that athletes improve their performance through simulations and simulation exercises. So what similarities would you draw about this AI-enabled role play practice using your tool with these kind of simulations that athletes do?
yeah, there's this type of practice that's been called deliberate practice.
Sure.
And, you know, Anders Ericsson, the 10,000 hours research, that is a key concept in what we built. The idea is that you're developing basics. So if you're going to learn how to hit a ball better, you go to the driving range or the batting cage, and you're going to work on your stance. And then you're going to work on your grip. And then you're going to work on your swing. And you're going to do that in a deliberate fashion. You're saying, I need to build up these components, and then I need to put them together in a way that will improve my overall performance. It's not just getting out there and swinging. Practicing a bad swing is just going to make you become really good at a bad swing. So you need to practice deliberately with a focus on, you know, individual skills development. They help you develop the basics. It's not the same as being in the game live with an audience and you know, all of the pressure that comes from being, you know, on the field. But if you've got the basics, you can be working on the higher level skills, the strategy of the game, the, you know, the emotional regulation, that the emotional intelligence that's required when you're in the game, because you've already, you know, your stance is good, you know, your grip is good, you know, your swing has the right follow through. And at that point, you're going to be able to, you know, perform at your best when it's needed. And in that way, I think what we've tried to do is bring that kind of thinking to what has traditionally been a somewhat of a I know it when I see it kind of area of corporate training field.
I noticed that you mentioned the term deliberate practice. Would you like to elaborate a little more on this term that you used?
Yeah, when Erickson was doing his research on what makes the best musicians the best, they didn't just practice a lot, because there were many who also practiced a lot and didn't achieve the same levels of performance. What's critical is that you have a plan, that you are, or your coach has a plan, where they say, okay, today we're just going to work on this one skill. How you, the fingering of a violin, of the strings of a violin. We're just going to work on the fingering, and you're going to do that same thing over and over until it is completely fluent. And then we're going to work, you might do that for, a full day or whatever. So deliberate practice is deliberate in the sense that it has specific goals for the components of the skills to be developed along the way, so that as you get the fingering right, you get the way you hold the bow right, you get the way that you hold the violin with your chin just right, and over time your play becomes much more proficient. Erickson has talked about driving a car. Turns out that for the vast majority, you achieve proficiency in driving the car within a couple of years. And drivers generally don't get better after those first couple of years. We like to think we are. Drivers are like, everybody's above average, right? But the reality is you get to be a good driver in a couple of years. And unless you work on specific skills, the kinds of things that professional drivers do, where they go to the track and they work on, turning tightly, or, people who live in cities get very good at parallel parking, and people in the suburbs aren't very good at it. Those kinds of things. You have to work on those individual skills. You're just not going to get better by virtue of driving to and from work every day for 40 years. You're going to be just as good when you retire as you were when you entered the workforce, unless you work at developing that skill in a deliberate way.
At times I've come across the term conversation first curriculum. I'm just curious to get your insights on that term.
So the idea behind conversation first curriculum is that instead of starting out thinking about what are the skills that a salesperson needs to have, you start off by saying, what does a good sales call look like? And you write that down. That's a great sales call. What does a bad sales call look like? And you write that down. And you use that conversation as the starting point for your curriculum. What skills are being demonstrated in that conversation? And you build the training materials, the pedagogical training materials around that. And then you have the foundation for role play as well, whether in person or through an app or some other method. And what it does is it ties together the framework, the theoretical stuff, with what you need to practice to achieve proficiency, and what they're actually going to be doing when they're on a sales call. We have definitely seen situations where and I'm not talking about sales specifically here, I'm just talking about in general. And I think it's common in management training and leadership training in particular, where there is a very complicated set of concepts that they want a manager to keep in mind. I've seen frameworks that have as many as 8 or 10 things that you need to keep in mind while you're having a coaching conversation with an employee. I don't know anybody who can keep 8 or 10 things in their head while conversing with someone about something entirely different from those 8 or 10 things. That's just an enormous cognitive load. If you start from the conversation and work backwards, we've seen a couple of things that are interesting. One is it actually simplifies what you need to teach in order to have that conversation, because in any given conversation, there's probably a smaller number of key components that you need to teach to. Now, across many conversations, that's going to grow to be a much larger number of concepts. But instead of having it done in terms of the framework first, you're starting from the performance goal, because ultimately that's your goal. You want all of your salespeople to have top performer conversations. That's your starting point.
Thanks for sharing your insight on this.